Jesus! What the hell? Woo, suck on that!
Mortal Kombat 1 recently had a balance patch, which means it's time for a new tier list. Many of the best characters and cameo fighters got nerfed, and as a result, the power levels have shifted. And to properly prepare myself for this video, I've been studying the tier list of skilled players and crazy players.
Look at my headphones, you see this?
Because even though this tier list is going to be my opinion, it's also important to study the perspective of other players. So make sure to let me know what your tier list looks like in the comments down below, and without any further ado, let's get started. Beginning with S tier. Johnny Cage and Kenshi. Both of these characters got nerfed in the recent update. Kenshi no longer does crazy block damage, and Johnny Cage is slower along with fewer plus frames. And as a result, they're still kind of even. However, I would personally argue that Kenshi is now number 1 in the game because he does not rely on cameo characters, whereas Johnny Cage sometimes does, and one of his preferred cameo partners did get nerfed in the update as well. But next up, let's talk Ashura, because everyone considers this character top 5 at this point. But even so, guess what? NetherRealm gave her buffs, and only buffs. That's right, Ashura is one of the only top characters that did not get a nerf, and then on top of that, she became stronger. So it might be crazy to say this, but I think Ashura might be top 3, mainly because she does not rely on cameo characters to do anything. She can zone by herself, she can counter zone by herself, she gets great damage by herself, has great whiff punishing by herself. Yes, the cameo characters can make her better, but her core gameplay does not rely on it at all. So next up, let's talk about Raiden. This man got 1 nerf to 1 special move, and now he does less chip damage on block, which means you can't exploit that move as much. The issue is, with the right cameo characters, he's still safe when doing it. So he's still a monster and can do pretty much everything you want to in the game. He's got teleports, great combos, great projectiles. You get the idea, he's still a force to be reckoned with, and many would argue he could be in front of Ashura, but once again, he does rely on cameos and Ashura doesn't, so I think Ashura might be better. I'm just gonna say it. I know it's a hot take, but only time will tell if Ashura is actually top 3 now. Next up, we have Sindel, who would normally be in front of Raiden, but here's the thing, cameo Kung Lao got nerfed, which means Sindel can't abuse her loops anymore, or at least not as often, and she kinda needs those loops to be a top 3 character in my opinion. So I think Sindel's not as crazy as she used to be. Don't get me wrong, she's still really good because she can steal your cameo for Pete's sake, but I don't think her teeth are quite as sharp without Kung Lao. And then on top of that, if I was a gambling man, I think Sindel's gonna be nerfed in the near future. In an upcoming patch, I think Sindel's gonna be nerfed even more, so this tier list may age like fine wine. Next up, let's talk about Peacemaker, the character who can do everything and is shockingly fun. His teleport is amazing, one of the best in the entire game. You could argue it is the best because you can do a jump in on the way down, or just do nothing, or fake the teleport. It's really good, right? And then he can counter zone. He has a force field that makes him immune to all projectiles in the game. His combo damage is also really good. It got nerfed a bit with Striker, but it's still really good. His mix-ups are decent too. He really can do a bit of everything. Some people might argue he's in front of Sindel, and that might be, but I think it's a bit too early to say, so I'm gonna put Peacemaker right here. And then for the last character in S tier, we have Liu Kang. This guy can do pretty much everything in the game, and because the cameo DLC characters are so good, it just makes him better, because the only thing Liu Kang was missing was mix-ups, and all the cameo characters just keep giving him mix-ups, and that's why he's so strong. He was already great at keep away, he can combo off of his throw, he's got really good damage in his combos for a keep away character, and he's also one of the fastest characters in the game, so yeah, Liu Kang is still really good. But next up, let's talk about A tier, Garrus. Everybody online is glazing Garrus. And I know this character is good, but I had no idea he was this good. Some people have him in top 5. I'm not sure if Garrus is that good, only because I don't see him that often at tournaments. I do agree his kit is really good, and I also agree he's a pretty complicated character, but I feel like if he was top 5, we would just see him a lot more. So in my personal opinion, he's right here. His toolset is amazing, he can do a bit of everything, but I just don't see him that much, so I think he's A tier. And then right behind him, we have Reiko. Once again, some people consider this guy top top 7, I'm gonna put him right here. He's a great character. He's got one of the best projectiles in the game for like no reason at all. His footsies are really good, his mobility is really good, and then on top of that, he's got a gun. The command grab is pretty much a gun if you know what you're doing. With the right cameo, it just transforms into 30%, 50%, even more if you have Fatal Blow. Yeah, he's a scary character, and that throw's unblockable too, so in other words, Reiko is a very solid character by default, but then also has a move that just kills you. Next up, let's talk about Rain, a character who can do pretty much everything. NetherRealm said he's the premier zoner, and yeah, he can zone, but he's also really scary up close. He's the only character in the game with a built-in Kara throw, and he's got low overhead mix-ups. He's got guaranteed hard to block setups with the right cameo. This guy is constantly making you guess, so he's also a very aggressive character on top of being good at zoning. The only reason I don't rank Rain higher on this tier list is because he doesn't have a gun. He doesn't kill you in 2 combos like everybody else on this list so far. Next up, we have Tanya. People are slowly figuring out this character and how she wins at pretty much every distance. From jumping distance, she definitely wins, because that standing 3 just hits you from downtown. And then up close, she has the 4-2-1-1, which is so easy to stagger. She can use Goro to steal her turn back, and then even from really far away, she can do an air projectile to avoid your zoning, or do an EX projectile that destroys your projectiles anyway. She can counter zone too. This character is good at every distance, and her counter, once people learn how to use that correctly, I think she might become a top 5 character, but so far, not enough players are abusing that counter like they should be. Next up, we have Katana, aka Foxy Grandpa, one of the only pro players that believes in this character, and I'm not gonna lie, I'm a believer too. Katana is way stronger than I thought she would be. It turns out with the right cameo, she not only does crazy damage, but also gets really crazy setups, especially in the corner. We're talking really hard to block mix-ups, and also just guaranteed plus frames, and even her meterless damage, if you know how to exploit her fan lift, is actually shockingly good. It looks weird to pull off correctly, but for mid-screen, her fan loops look really Her fan loops do a lot of damage, so Katana's just kinda great. Her down 3 is incredible, her sweep is incredible, her back 2-4 is also pretty good. Just an all-around decent character, honestly, really scary, and her toolkit can do pretty much everything you want. Alrighty, next up, let's talk about Smoke. This character has mix-ups for days, his teleport is great for counter zoning, he can turn invisible, and he's better at it than Reptile for some weird reason, and if you master his vapor cancels, he's really hard to predict or interrupt. Like, it's almost impossible. If the Smoke player knows what they're doing, he's a really scary character. He doesn't have the craziest combo damage, but it's completely fine when you consider all the other things that he does. Smoke's biggest weakness is, if you're too predictable, a lot of his stuff does have gaps, and it also can be up blocked, and that will destroy him. So if played irresponsibly, Smoke can be countered pretty hard, but I still think he's a great character. Some people put him in S tier. I don't think he's that good. Maybe at the lower casual levels or just semi-competitive levels he's that good, but I'm trying to do like a full range tier list here, and I don't think Smoke is a top 10 in that regard. Next up, we have Omni-Man, the most damaging character in the game by himself. This guy gets 43% without a cameo and without spending any bar. It's honestly quite crazy. His teleport is also pretty good. He's way faster than you would think. He can easily counter zoning with his Viltrumite stance, so I think a lot of people are sleeping on Omni-Man. He's honestly quite good, especially when combined with the right cameo. But next up, let's talk about Kung Lao. I think a lot of people are downplaying Kung Lao because his game plan is super straightforward. He can pressure you and then steal his turn with Goro, or keep himself safe with Goro. His wake up is safe on block and can lead to a full combo with Goro. His dive kick, if you miss on purpose, recovers really fast, so I think people look at him and say, oh, he's too simple to be good, but I see Kung Lao everywhere at tournaments, and that speaks for itself. He's clearly a good character. Next up, we have B tier, and at the very front, I'm going to put Baraka. I think this character is still decent. His damage is no longer insane, and it's a bit harder to keep him safe than it was in the past, but I still think his kit is really good. His bleed damage and block damage is still really good. I think he's fine, especially online. But General Shao. People need to stop sleeping on this guy. He's so good. He's got mix-ups, he's got range, he's got footsies, he's got damaging setups, and with the right cameo, he can even counter zone and get in fairly easily. I think General Shao is a really good character. I still kinda wish the Netherrealm would buff his damage, not because it's too low, but because he's Shao, and I think Shao should always be one of the heaviest hitters, but that's just me. Oh boy, it's time for another hot take, Quan Chi. This guy got several buffs and a brand new attack in the recent update. He can now drain your meter with a portal that tracks your location and also gives him armor, which means he can force a mix-up or even do something unsafe on block because he can eat that hit for free. That's already really good, especially for a keep away character, but then on top of that, he can open all the portals at once if the player wants to. That would give him better projectiles, he'd be draining your meter and getting armor and other buffs on top of that. So that's really crazy. But then for the cherry on top, his skeleton prison now activates on block, which means he can force you to wake up into it and you're still stuck inside of it no matter what, which guarantees at least one portal, which likely guarantees armor, which leads to a free mix-up. Some people think this character might be like top 5 or top 10, right? Some people think he might be the best character ever. I'm not sure about that, only because until this update, he was like bottom 5 to most people. So I don't think these changes suddenly make him the greatest character ever, but time will tell, and if Quan Chi is way up here, that sounds awesome to me. That sounds great. That could be really fun to watch. I think a high-level Quan Chi player is so much fun to watch. Next up, we have Melina, one of my favorite characters to play, and I might honestly use her at Evo. Her combo damage is crazy high, her hit confirms are super easy, her teleport can counter zone to an extent. It's not super fast, it is kind of slow, but if you make a good read, it can still counter zone. Her overhead beats pretty much every armored wake up in the game. If it was up to me, she'd be higher on this list, but the more research I did, everybody else ranks her super low. In fact, I think Diff had her in bottom 3, and that blew my mind. Maybe she's worse than I think she is, but whenever I play her, she's one of the easiest characters to get wins with because if I touch you twice, you just lose. She does that much damage. Next up, we have Li Mei, Reptile, and Havoc. Not too much changed for most of these characters except for Havoc. One of his attack strings actually got buffed, the one that has an unblockable in it. Until recently, the opponent could actually summon their cameo even while being hit during that attack because there was a gap. That's no longer possible anymore, and I think that might actually help Havoc out quite a bit, which is why he's a bit higher on my list than he is on other people's lists. I kind of want to put him in front of Reptile, honestly, because I don't see very many Reptile players, but I don't know. Reptile is a very slept on character. His kit's actually not bad. Good projectile, invisibility, decent teleport, good hit confirms, great auto shimmy, all that stuff. So I'm not entirely sure, but this arrangement makes the most sense to me. Oh my gosh, I forgot Shang Tsung right here behind Melina. Apparently people have figured out the Shang Tsung matchup and he's no longer a crazy threat anymore. I still think he's a decent character, and keep in mind, no character in Mortal Kombat 1 is bad. I've said this multiple times, and if you listen to pro players or just skilled players in general, they'll tell you the exact same thing. There's no bad characters. Every fighter in this game has the secret sauce. The secret ingredient to victory is in all of these characters, but for some of them, the recipe is just a bit more complicated. Which means finally, it's time for C tier. Sub-Zero, Natara, and Scorpion. The reason Scorpion's in last place is because his best cameo buddy, Stryker, did get nerfed, which is not a death sentence. He can still use Chameleon, but my point is one of his best cameos did get weaker, and that's why he's behind Natara instead of in front of her. None of these characters are bad. In fact, Sub-Zero is my second most confident character. I think Sub-Zero is great, even though he is in C tier. But there you have it, everyone, my post-balance patch tier list. There are some controversial picks here, Asher being top 3, Sindel being weaker than Raiden. I know, that's just my opinion. Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And then while you're down there, leave a like if you enjoyed the video. It helps my channel out a ton. And then finish that combo by subscribing and ringing that bell so you never miss any future videos. Make sure to come back next time, and as always, stay underdogs.